in the fourth and fifth administration was the former speaker, obviously chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, chairperson of the African National Congress, one of the founders of the Congress of the People, and certainly someone who genuinely held firm on his principles of constitutionalism. And certainly all of us can recall the fights that he used to have in Parliament. And so I wanted to extend my deep condolences to his colleagues and even those who worked with him from the African National Congress. Want to send my deep condolences in that regard. And so before we begin that meeting, I thought, just as a South African who can appreciate, while history may not always deliver perfect human beings, but they are imperfect human beings who sought to serve our country as best as they could. And therefore, Honorable Lokota was one of those. So may his soul rest in peace, and we pray for his family. Let me then request, Mashila, if you wouldn't mind, just to flight the agenda for today. Honorable members, the agenda being put before you has a number of minutes that we have to consider. There are some apologies. We have a presentation from the National Treasury. And then, of course, we will consider the report on our study tour to India, and then look at a number of minutes that we have to go through. So that is the broadness of the agenda as it says. This meeting is scheduled to begin at 9. It will hopefully finish before midday today. We have a lot to get through, and so I want us as best to be as disciplined as possible. With those, can I ask if there's a member who's willing to move for the adoption of the agenda this morning?
Yes, good morning, Chair.
Good morning, Honorable Nduli. Are you moving for the adoption of the agenda?
Yes, Chair. I would like to move for the movement of the agenda, adoption of the agenda.
Thank you very much, Honorable Nduli. Is there a seconder to this regard?
Good morning, Chair. I second Mkonto.
Thank you, Honorable Mkonto. Much appreciated. With the agenda this being duly adopted, let me then officially open today's meeting, convened in law, but also convened with the view of the consideration of the pieces of legislation that were tabled before Parliament by the Minister of Finance last week on Wednesday. Today meeting is considering the Division of Revenue Bill, the Special Appropriation Bill, and in due course we will have to look at the question that speaks to whether appropriation bill, etc. We have already had presentations on some of the legislation that was tabled, presentations from the PBO and also the FFC. Our job today is to deal effectively with the allocation of resources. And there are many conversations that we need to have, but I want to narrow them down to be focused on that. National Treasury is joining us today to present on the respective bills. And so as South Africans, we need to be able to interrogate where the people's budget goes to. I also will update members as to when the respective adoptions go. As you know, by the Money Bills and Related Matters Act, the fiscal framework has to be adopted within Parliament within 16 days, and then the Division of Revenue Bill will have to be adopted after 35 days. So the scheduling of this issue then becomes important. We will also have public hearings to this effect, and so I look forward to our engagement this morning. With those opening remarks, may I ask if there's if there are any apologies to be noted? Can I ask the committee secretariat if you could update us on any apologies for today?
Good morning, Chair, honorable members, and all in the platform. We have an apology from Honorable Gamede. He's outside the country on a study tour with human settlements. He might be joining, and yesterday also he joined from Brazil. Thank you so much, Chair.
Okay, much appreciated. Are there any apologies from any other political party? Okay, with no further apologies noted, and honorable members, may I request that these apologies be sent ahead of time, and then we can proceed from there. With those and that brief opening, may I request then, may I hand over to National Treasury to take us through the two respective presentations that have been circulated to members. And then we will have an opportunity to interrogate them. Let me just say upfront with members, in the interest of keeping the issue on time, normally when we have a physical meeting, normally we give an allocated time to parties so that they can ensure that their questions are answered. Given that this is a virtual platform, that is very difficult to manage. So what I'm going to do is ask members, as it is convention, that we keep a 5-minute question and answer session so that all members have an opportunity to ask questions as best as they can, and then we can get a response. If we move through it quick enough, we can then be able to get another round or another set of questions. But we have a very congested program today with a number of issues that we want to consider. I also want to make sure that we don't just do programming for program's sake. We want to make sure that we really do interrogate these pieces of legislation. So with that in mind, I'm not sure, I haven't received an apology from the Minister of Finance or the Deputy Minister of Finance, so I'm assuming they're on the call. Would that be correct, Mashile?
I'll confirm the presence, Chair, just now.
If I'd like to understand who then will be leading the delegation from National Treasury. I see. Are you leading the delegation?
Good morning, Chair and honorable members. So Minister and DG, as they indicated, they're traveling abroad, as
Yes.
indicated in the Friday meeting.
Yes.
So yes, we've got I think 3 DGs is on the call at the moment, and the acting DG might also join us. Mr. Edgar Sishi might join us in this meeting.
Okay. In the
Yes.
light of that, then may I welcome, you can direct us as to who will be taking us through the presentation, and then you can begin from there. If the presentation can then be flighted. Mashile, will you put up, I'll allow National Treasury to go through it. Thank you very much.
Honorable Chair, maybe just to apologize for the lateness of the Division of Revenue presentation. We sincerely apologize to the committee. We know that they were supposed to submit well ahead of time, so I thought we should apologize for that. Ms. Wendy Fanu will take us through the Division of Revenue presentation, and then we'll hand over to Public Finance for the Special Appropriation Bill. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, honorable members, and thank you for the opportunity to present. If I can just ask for the Division of Revenue presentation to be flighted, and thank you so much for that. And if we can then move to the next slide, please. And then the next one after that. And the next one after that, please. This slide is important because it basically indicates the responsibilities of national government, provincial government, and municipalities in terms of service delivery. And it shows that all 3 spheres of government has got very critical functions to perform to make a better South Africa. And national government sits with important functions like higher education, with the social grants and policing, for example, and also defense. Provincial governments sit with responsibilities of basic education, health and social development, and municipalities sit with the provision of basic services such as water, sanitation and electricity. And what is important to note, both national government and provinces are largely funded through the national fiscus. Their ability to raise revenues themselves are very, very limited, because the revenue that the receiver collects are then distributed amongst the 3 spheres of government, and municipalities do have own revenue capabilities. And a very important point to note as well, there's spending pressures in all 3 spheres of government and resources So it's always a very difficult approach, and political choices need to be made on how to balance available resources against the spending pressures of all three spheres of government. If we can then go to
Honorable members, I don't know if the speaker is Wendy. I don't know if I've lost you there. Can anyone else hear Wendy?
No, she has
No,
disappeared.
Chair, we've lost her.
Our Ohalaletswe, can you help in this regard? Because Wendy has disappeared.
I can step in, Chair.
I'm always puzzled when internet connections fail us, especially on virtual meetings. I mean, we really just try and do our best, Doc, to get everybody on site to places with stable internet. Doc, if you can proceed, I'm not sure who's now going because it doesn't help. I mean, the reason we move meetings to virtual platforms is also to avoid cost, but it becomes costly when we can't proceed anyways.
Sincere apologies for that, Chair. I will take over from here until Wendy is available. So Chair, this is the division of revenue, which shows that the three shares, the shares of the three spheres of government, but also reflects the kind of breakdown of the allocation per each of the spheres. As you can see, with each there is a direct allocation in terms of the equitable shares, but then for the provincial as well as the local government, then we break it down by either equitable share or conditional grants. You'll also see by national that we also have the indirect grants, which are managed by the national departments on the behalf of the municipalities and provinces. Quite importantly, Chair, is the message from this division of revenue is us being able to achieve the fiscal sustainability by stabilizing debt and reducing the debt as a share of GDP. You would note that in the past, we've always been worried about the growth in terms of the debt service cost, which was at some point, I think last budget, when you met with yourself around growing at 7.1%. We're happy to report to you that that now has been really dealt with. The growth there is quite marginal going forward, which speaks to our ability to be able to stabilize that there. And also, this is partly due to other measures in the system where we're trying to support the economy while avoiding any tax burdens that are placed on either businesses or the individuals in this case. We continue to then improve the efficiency in terms of the composition of spending. We will speak to these as they relate to provinces and municipalities later in our slides as well. So if Mashile, you can move to the next slide, please. Honorable members, the division of revenue continues to be a tool that we use for redistribution. So where in areas of need, we then place additional resources to be able to assist with that. So as you can see, both the two figures we're showing here, one looking at provinces, that if you look at Northern Cape, for instance, you are easily to see that we subsidize the households and the population within the Northern Cape quite more than we subsidize those in the Western Cape as well as Gauteng, where there's actually an economic base and an ability to raise revenues, especially in the municipal space. If you look at the category A municipalities, where the metropolitan municipalities are, and in favor of the more rural and the small municipalities in B3 and 4. Next slide. So in these slides, honorable members, I think the message is quite clear. The message here is there are some of the provisions that needed to change in the division of revenue to allow for some of the processes to be much more clearer in the space. So we have really worked on section 1 to deal with the issues of interpretation, make it clear there in terms of the definitions of the PTOT, which is the Public Transport Operations Grant, which we have then been omitted as a reference to the clauses. This is made to the conditional grants framework. We've also tried to align the changes that have been made in section 26.5, just limiting the participation of the intermediate cities there and in the integrated urban development grant. So there was a report that there's some confusion in terms of who qualifies to be part of this and who doesn't. So that clarifies it then. Also, in terms of the duties of the receiving officer with regard to Schedule 4 allocations. So this we have just updated it to ensure that there's a clearer understanding on how the Schedule 4 municipal grant need to be managed. So here there's the whole chain of reporting that we're speaking to there as it relates to the provincial treasuries, but also those municipalities that are non-delegated, meaning they remain on the national treasury as supervision or oversight. Next slide. It's moving a bit slow. Okay, there we are. So here also again, in terms of Schedule 5 and 7, there's clarity in terms of the duties of the receiving officer and the timelines by which they are required to then be able to report at the end of each quarter. So this is also clarifying the issue of the evaluation report that need to be submitted in terms of the metropolitan municipalities, and they need to submit these to the provincial treasuries where these fall under the supervision of the provincial treasuries. Next. Again, section 16 has been updated to then assist the honorable members would also have an appreciation that there are a number of municipalities that then fail to do what is expected of them in terms of the funding that is provided to them. So what we're doing here is really to update it to enable direct transfers to some of the implementing agents. So there's a big part around the MIG reform that we're introducing in this budget, which allows for capable district municipalities to actually be able to deliver on the behalf of the locals in those districts. And obviously, there are other agencies of government that also have been brought in to assist in those cases. Case in point, the municipal MISA, the DBSA are some of those agencies that have readied themselves to assist where possible. So this is an extension of what is already happening in terms of the indirect need and the existing arrangements in the integrated national electricity program of ESCOM. So this is just to clarify it and make it easy for that to be understood, but also to be implemented. The main change here, change, honorable members, is really to ensure that service delivery does take place in these areas, whether a municipality is able to do so or not, that we can tap into the others. The same logic then, honorable members, is applied in terms of section 1920, where even in terms of the reallocation of funds to non-performing municipalities. Now, these can still also be directed to capable districts in those areas when these municipalities are found to also be able to assist them. Section 20 is also updated to then be assisting in terms of that particular one as well. Then the section 26, obviously, we've spoken about, intermediate cities that can apply to participate in that. So this is just around the preparation of that and clarifying it. Next one. So in terms of section 28, so this is to assist in terms of the duties of the municipality as contained in the division of revenue. Here we're trying to, improve consistency with other clauses within the division of revenue as well. So it really allows for a 14-day working window for the submission of these budgets. So to also help align at a provincial district level as well, so that there's a clear sight of all the reports that are being introduced there. Section 37, honorable members, is really to speak to an additional municipality that is being added to the 257 municipalities. So this municipality is in the Free State. So it's a split between Kopanong and its various components. So we only have a code for that municipality. So this is to make it easier, honorable members, so that after the elections, then that we can then be allowed to gazette the allocation for the new municipality, both for the equitable share and the conditional grant, splitting the Kopanong allocation, as it were. The others are just on the reporting, honorable members and timelines, so I'm not going to get to that. Next slide. This one, honorable members, whenever there are changes to the schedules of the bill, we would like to then draw your attention to those, so that you can, if you were looking at the previous bill, you can know what kind of a change that has taken place to assist you to really have ease of reference. So you would know that the Ilimali Thema, as well as the Comprehensive Agriculture Support Program, have been merged into one grant. So this will be found as part A of Schedule 5 of the bill into that single grant. So the name has been retained as the Comprehensive Agriculture Support Grant. In the energy space as well, there is the matter of the Energy Efficiency Demand Side Management Grant with the Integrated National Electricity Program. This is the one for municipalities, not the ESCOM one. So again, we are showing that this is part of Schedule 5B in the bill, where you will find this particular measure. And then when it comes to an indirect fund, which was previously managed by the National Treasury and has ceased to exist as a grant, we are showing you that this has since been discontinued and removed as part of Schedule 6 Part B. That concludes. Next slide. My part of the presentation, honorable members. Godisan will take us through the provincial changes in the division of revenue. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and good morning once again to the honorable members. I hope I'm audible. This slide just shows the technical updates we've made to the provincial equitable share. The block on your left just shows the different components of the equitable share and the updates with the most recent data we've made to the equitable share. All 6 components of the equitable share have been updated with data from Stats SA, the 2025 mid-year population estimates, as well as the 2024 general household survey. We also updated the provincial equitable share with administrative data from health and the Department of Basic Education for the respective 2 components. Also, we have updated the poverty component. This time last year, it was announced that Stats SA has updated the income expenditure survey for 2022 and 2023 with the latest data. We have updated that as well within the equitable share. So this slide just essentially just shows the updates we've made to the provincial equitable share. Next slide, please. This slide, honorable members, just shows the total provincial transfers for the 2026. In total, we are transferring about 810 billion rands to provinces, the bulk of it made up of the equitable share and the remainder made up of conditional grants. And the additions to the equitable share and conditional grants we'll get to in the next slides. With this being said, annual growth of the provincial equitable share grows at about 3.5%, whilst over the 2026 MTEF conditional grants grow about 2.9%. The review of the provincial equitable share is still ongoing, with the focus this year being mostly on the education component, where we will include special needs learners within the component, as well as increasing differentiation amongst learners according to the respective quintiles. And thank you. This slide just shows the changes. The next set of slides will show the changes we've made to provincial allocations. As announced at the 2025 MTBPS, there were CPI adjustments made across the 3 spheres of government. And those adjustments were made to both the provincial equitable share and provincial conditional grants, which I'll get to a little bit later. However, within the conditional grants, certain COE components have been shielded or exempt from the CPI adjustments. And this is just to respect the provisions of the wage agreement that was entered into. With regards to the CPI adjustments and the effect that they have on the provincial equitable share baseline, the provincial equitable share has been adjusted downwards by 1 billion rand in 2026, 2.2 billion in 27-28, and 2.2 billion in 2028-29. And this is relative to the indicative allocations that we had provided in the previous MTEF. Furthermore, conditional grants have been adjusted downwards by about 568 million rand in 26-27, 1.2 billion rand in 27-28, and 3.1 billion rand in 28-29. Again, focusing on that the COE components have been exempt from the CPI adjustments. In the main, within the equitable share, we are adding money, about 31.2 billion rand over the MTEF, as a carry through from cost of allocations announced in the May 2025 budget. And the 31.2 billion rand is added mostly to the education and health sectors, with the education sector receiving just close to 9 billion rand over the MTEF. And this is to support provinces with compensation of employee costs and other pressures within the sector. About 21 billion is added to the health sector to deal with, again, employee costs, shortfalls in goods and services, as well as the employment of doctors. Furthermore, we have added about 340 million rand in 26-27 to the provincial equitable share. And this is to support provinces with the implementation of the early retirement and voluntary exit programs. We have also added about 319 million to the equitable share. And this is for the as part of the presidential employment stimulus in the education sector for the continuation of the education assistance program. Next slide, please. For conditional grants, there are a number of reprioritizations and additions to grants. At first, it's within the Comprehensive Agricultural Support Grant, where 109 million is reprioritized from the grant to the National Department And this is for the National Department to strengthen the sector or the system as a whole by assisting with the implementation of the blended financing program, the development of an e-certification system, and the implementation of animal identification recording. Furthermore, 3 billion rand is reprioritized from the Human Settlements Development Grant to the Informal Settlements Urban Program Grant to address previous reductions that have significantly lowered the baseline of the ISUP, and these were reductions that were made in the 2024 MTEF process, and this is just reversing those reductions that were made to the Informal Settlements Urban Program Grant. As a continuation of the adjustment that we had made last year, about 1.1 million rand in 26-27 and 1 million rand again in 27-28 has been reduced from the Human Settlements Grant and the ISUP grant and added to the Provincial equitable share. And this is just to correct for funding that was allocated as a top-up for COE in those grants. And it's just a continuation of the amendment that we had made last year. 5 million rand has also been reprioritized from the EPWP grant, the Provincial grant, to also address existing pressures within the Department of Public Works. In addition, we've made to conditional grants, about 12.8 billion rand is added to the Early Childhood Development Grant over the 2026 MTEF. And this is just to the continued expansion of early childhood development services. But of this, we have also reprioritized 800 million rand in 2026-27. And this is about the breakdown of the reprioritization. It still remains within the sector, about 446 million rand and 13 million rand respectively, to protect the National Schools Nutrition Program and the learners with severe to profound intellectual disabilities. And these were additions made to those two grants to shield them from the CPI adjustments. Furthermore, we have made 342 million rand from that 800 million rand in the equitable share. And the purpose of this is just to equalize the remuneration of the just over 6,000 qualified grade R teachers. And this is just to equalize the salaries between provinces, as certain provinces weren't paying their salaries for those teachers in the norm that they're supposed to pay it. We have also added 175 million rand to the Early Childhood Development Grant, and this is just for the implementation of the e-cares. The e-cares allocation is just for hiring personnel who will go to facilities and collect data, ECD data for the system, as well as providing them with tools of trade. Next slide, please. Again, we have made additions to, with regards to the budget facility for infrastructure. We have made a 218 million rand addition to the health sector for BFI. This is for Tygerberg and the Klipfontein regional hospitals. And this addition has been ring-fenced and included in the health facility revitalization grant for the Western Cape. We have also made additions for disaster funding. About 1.5 billion rand is added to for disaster relief for 26-27. And these are for Eastern Cape with 708 million and Limpopo for 804 million. As I had previously stated, with regards to the presidential stimulus program, and the continuation and the funding of the presidential employment stimulus program, about 503 million, as well as 747 million have been prioritized from the education infrastructure grant, as well as the provincial roads maintenance grant, respectively. We also highlight that there are mergers within the provincial fiscal framework. with respect to conditional grants. As my colleague had indicated in the changes to the clauses, there's a merger of the Comprehensive Agricultural Support Program grant as well as the Lima Letsemo Projects grant, and they're merged into one grant. And the conditional grant framework accounts for this merger as well. The School Infrastructure Backlogs Grant, which was an indirect grant, is being merged into the Education Infrastructure Grant, starting in 26-27 as the final year of the School Infrastructure Grant being a standalone grant. But to close this off, 448 million rand has been allocated to the School Infrastructure Backlogs Grant to complete projects that were allocated for 26-27, whilst the remaining 1.2 billion rand has been incorporated into the Education Infrastructure Grant for 26-27. Next slide, please. These are just the changes to local government. And my colleague, Dr. Pakis, can take you through the changes that are made to the local government sector. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Honorable Chair. So in this slide, we really are showing this different transfers mechanisms that are moving to local government at a high level. Of course, there is a detailed breakdown, especially per conditional grant, in terms of what flows to these different municipalities. What is quite important, honorable members, is that there is a healthy growth in terms of the local government equitable share of 4.1%. But overall, the direct allocations to local government grow at 3.1%. And this obviously then is reflected in terms of the share of local government from the nationally raised revenue of 9.5% over the MTF. Next slide. This is the equitable share, a formula, and honorable members, as you know it. Quite importantly is that we have also made updates, important updates to the formula. The issue of bulk water has been updated with the latest information coming from the water board, but also in the electricity space, coming from the NAPSA ESCOM multi-year price determination system, and other areas have been grown by a CPI. We're still using the population growth numbers as per the 2023 budget, as we await a full suite of data coming from Stats SA in terms of the poverty levels per municipal space. So this we've been promised. We will have it for the 2027 MTF. Having said that, honorable members, we have fully funded 11.2 million for households in 26-27 financial year. Apologies for that. And then as you can see, this is just a breakdown of the different components of the equitable share for your interest. In terms of the conditional grants, there are some changes that have been made, and obviously there's the winding down in terms of the neighborhood development partnership grant, which is been, I think the one part of it, which is the technical assistance, has moved to the Treasury's vote to continue to provide support in the infrastructure space. Then the infrastructure portion is being phased out over 3 years. So if you look at the allocation there, you will start to see that it goes down in each of the 3 years over the MTF. One big change, honorable members, is on the public transport network grant. Earlier on, when we met with yourselves, indicated there was a 3 billion savings got into the TARS process. We've since added further reductions there to assist in terms of process accelerated modernization and placement around the the rail signaling infrastructure. This is an important one for us, honorable members, in the sense that it still stays within the transport sector as well. And all the three spheres will then continue to benefit from the changes that are happening there. The impact on the ground has been looked at. It is one of the poorly performing grants, so there are not going to be disturbances to the projects currently underway while a plan is being made. This is just to indicate, honorable members, that the skills development grant will not be taking any new interns as it's been worked on, discontinued over the next 3 years. Also to fund the public employment program, there's a reprioritization from some of the major grants in local government, informal settlement operating, the MIG, as well as the INEP ESCOM. So this is where there was scope to make these reductions, honorable members, where spending was poor even after factoring in the kind of support that has been provided to these municipalities. Next slide. Yeah, honorable members, what we are showing yourselves is through the budget facility for infrastructure. There are a number of role players, and one of those is the infrastructure fund, which is then tasked with the responsibility of going to the market, getting additional resources to then augment the fiscal in terms of what it provides to these municipalities. So in the case of the non-revenue water project in eThekwini, both the IFA, the allocation, as well as the municipal allocation went to the municipality. So we're just correcting for that now so that we can also be able to leverage the private sector through infrastructure fund. So the rest of the detail here is just showing the kind of impact in the financial sense as well in numbers terms. Thanks. Next slide. I've already spoken, honorable members, to some of these changes in terms of the clauses that were allowing us to do some of these things. We're really beefing up our support programs and safeguarding the projects in these municipalities. So again, there is an allocation of 536 million through the MIG and direct grant, meaning it is being spent by the Department of Cooperative Governance on the behalf of the 21 municipalities that have been identified to be quite in a serious need of support through this avenue. So just to ensure that there is also capacity building that comes with it. So these are additional measures that we have brought into the framework, but also we have also expanded the suite of institutions that can assist there. Obviously, MISA has been the main player in that space, but the DBSA and capable districts are also being added into that space as well. And of course, there is also a need for all stakeholders to have a proper understanding of the each and of their roles, so that DCOC has started in terms of the process, and by the 30th of June, they would have assisted as far as that is concerned. This is the last slide, honorable members. We just want to draw your attention to the annexures, where we are showing the responses that have been provided to yourself through Annexure A of the budget review, but also the recommendations, how we've dealt with the recommendations of the FFC, both those that have been responded to in terms of the division of revenue, but also those that the relevant sector department will be responding directly to the FFC. Thank you very much, DDG.
Thank you, Chair. We're done with the National Treasury, the Division of Revenue presentation. Dr. Bija, we'll hand over to you.
Thanks, Ohade, and good morning, honorable members. I hope I'm audible. Please, Mashila, you can load the presentation from your side. The one dealing with the special appropriation bill. Yeah. No, thanks, honorable members, honorable chair and honorable members. You can go to the next slide. Yeah, so the special appropriation bill that we are presenting here today is being brought before yourselves based mainly on two aspects of legislations. This bill is introduced in terms of section 73(2) of the Constitution that empowers the Minister of Finance to table a money bill before Parliament, and it is also introduced in terms of section 6 4D of the 2025 Appropriation Act, which indicates that all expenditures authorized in terms of section 6(1)(c) of the Appropriation Act must be introduced into an appropriation bill within 120 days after the Minister of Finance has authorized such an expenditure. So I think here in the first slide, we are indicating that, so there are two aspects about this bill. The first aspect of the bill is to appropriate 13.5 billion rand for expenditure authorized in terms of section 6(1)(c) of the Appropriation Act. And these are allocations announced already in the 2025 adjustment budget as part of the contingency reserve. So these amounts were already provided for in the revised fiscal framework that was tabled by the minister in November when tabling the MTBPS. And these expenditures are broken down in detail in Schedule 1 of the appropriation of the special appropriation bill. The second aspect of the bill covers or appropriates about 8.5 billion rand for expenditure requirements of the state. These are expenditures that could not be reasonably delayed within the system, and these are some of the spending pressures that we were aware of throughout the year. So special appropriation, so this is in terms of section 73(2) of the Constitution as I already outlined, and these expenditure items are set out in Schedule 2 of the Special Appropriation Bill. Next slide, please. So this slide just provides a breakdown of expenditures that are authorized in terms of Section 6(1)(c) of the Appropriation Act 2025. And as I've already indicated, they are outlined in Schedule 1 of the Special Appropriation Bill. There is an allocation of 2 billion rand, 2.1 billion rand for the rebuilding of Parliament. And the second aspect is about 1.1 billion rand to Home Affairs, specifically to the Independent Electoral Commission for the preparation of the 2026 local government elections. In addition, there is about 1.8 billion rand allocated in 2025-26 for government's contribution to the capitalization of the credit guarantee vehicle. And you also have the expenditure on Vote 30 within the Department of Communications and Digital Technologies, about 189 million rand to cover expenses related to dual illumination due to the continuation of due to delays in the switch off of analog signal within the department. And of course, there are allocations within Vote 40 transport, 8.3 billion rand. These allocations are mainly under budget facility for infrastructure, specifically for Transnet, to cover costs related to revitalization of the North Corridor, about 4.9 billion rand, and of course the iron ore corridors. And these are some of the big infrastructure projects that are being undertaken as part of reforms to improve the network industry and to also enhance potential revenues to be generated in these sectors. Next slide, thank you. So this slide really provides breakdown of Schedule 2 of the Special Appropriation Bill. There is an allocation of about 1 billion rand, and this is to provide for share subscription in the International Finance Corporation. And there is also an allocation of around 700 million rand for Centec operations, mainly due to the fact that the operations for Centec have been negatively affected due to the non-payment by SABC in recent years to Centec and putting the solvency of Centec in a negative light. And of course, in vote 40 again, there's an allocation of 6.7 billion rand. This is mainly for under PRASA to provide for the rolling stock fleet renewal program of about, and the allocation is about 5.8 billion rand. This is mainly really contractual commitments within PRASA for the rolling stock fleet renewal program. And there is also an allocation of about 1 billion rand for the Durban Container Terminal. This is part of the budget facility for infrastructure allocations. So all BFI-related allocations, they have been sort of front-loaded. They were supposed to be provided for in the 2026 MTF allocations, but they were front-loaded to de-risk the fiscal framework in 2026 MTF so that the debt can peak in 2025-26. And this has already been outlined by the minister when tabling the budget. So this slide provides modalities to account for Schedule 2 allocations. And here we are indicating in the bill that despite the effective date of the Act, appropriations and expenditure incurred by 31st of May 2026 will be regarded as expenditure attributed to the 2025-26 financial year, mainly due to the lateness of tabling of this special appropriation bill. And furthermore, the request for rollover of any unspent funds may be submitted on or before the 5th of June 2026. Next slide, please. Thank you, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members. This is the summary of the Special Appropriation Bill. I do have other colleagues who will also address some of your questions on the bill. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to the National Treasury. Read the presentation. I don't know if Acting DDG, there are any additional points that you want to make? Not there being, I will now recognize honorable members who want to put questions to the presentations. So you can raise your hands now and then I will recognize you. We can move from there. Honorable Waitlin, Honorable Galega Mazibugo, Honorable Mkonto, Honorable Bateman, Honorable Ntuli. And then Sikete, Siate. I think that covers that. Let me begin with Honorable Waitlin. You can proceed.
Good morning, Chair. Am I audible and visible?
You are both those things.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, good morning. Thank you very much to National Treasury for presenting to us quite a succinct, to the point presentation. Chair, I would like to start off by saying that I would address this in two parts. The first part would relate to the appropriation bill as it stands. Then I want to speak very specifically about the special appropriation thereafter. Just a few comments before going to my question. So we are aware that a large number of funding were given to both health and education, and that's because of obviously staffing requirements, in which we supported it. But my concern lies in that there is very little submission done and improvement around upgrades and maintenance that is so much required in these hospitals and the likes and schools. So you're having staff now, but you don't have schools. And we saw what happened at Cholo, if I remember, when we were in Eastern Cape. So these people will again be neglected in this process. So I'm very concerned about that and how the appropriation was done around that. The second part I would like to talk to, and very concerning, and I'll raise this question around the municipal infrastructure grant, and particularly introducing Schedule 6B again, and particularly around who they want to use to assist these municipalities. That to me is a massive problem at the moment, and we again can see money not being spent or spent in such a way that it's going to cost us so much. Chair, if you allow me just to go through some of the questions. The first one relates to the mixed Schedule 6 indirect delivery. I want to know how National Treasury is going to manage and the cost for DBSA and the MISA and any other agency they wish to utilize to assist these municipalities. From what I'm understanding, 66% of our current municipalities are not able to drive their own projects. I'll stand on correction, but I'm happy to take it from National Treasury to tell me how are they going to manage these and who is going to manage it. What I'm also concerned is the fact that they're going to utilize districts to run municipalities. And I think that's going to be a big, massive problem. And even the districts themselves don't have the capacity. I need really to have to identify and tell us how they're going to manage these performance. And also the cost, particularly on DBSA and MISA. That's the one question. The second question relates to particularly, and I just want to go down to my questions, Chair, if you just allow me. One moment. I've written them down. Here they are. Right. So, yes. So the second one I wanted to check with him is around the TBGN grant, the transport grant that they cancelled last year. Currently, what we are faced with, Chair, is that there are a number of metros that have signed BOCA agreements with taxi associations, and that leaves us with a serious financial risk on these agreements not going to be honoured. I would like to know if National Treasury is aware of that, and what are they going to do about that as far as the BOCA agreement is with these people are concerned. Then, Chair, I would like to go down to and I don't necessarily would go into the detail of the complete special appropriations, but in particular, I would like to focus on the PRASA signalling infrastructure. They must please explain to me, how did they get to that point? From what I understood, last year, signalling systems were funded for. There was a request. What happened with that money? And where are we now? Why are we having an additional 5.7 billion committed to this project? I am concerned about the misalignment between rolling stock and infrastructure. You know, our rail corridors are not even fully operational. The signal systems are damaged. We don't have the capacity to manage this. How does this stand in relation to I think there's about 8 corridors that are signed off for private partnerships for people to take over some of these areas, and how do they fit into this whole project? And then also the lack of performance. We've seen this now again. We are back at the special appropriation, whereas the money was available last year. And what happened there? I'm very unclear as a long-term sustainability of this, and I understand that there is a social aspect to this. Please do not that I don't not know what I'm talking about, but I am aware that there is a social aspect to this. But my concern lies in the long-term sustainability of these projects. What are they going to do once they've got the rolling stock? And how many? In actual fact, just a basic question: how many of these are we buying? How many stock are we buying? What are we buying? And we're not even aware or sure. And if these questions are not properly answered or don't have the questions, I will refer this back to one of my colleagues at the Transport Committee. But we need to get proper answers. We don't have the details around this specific project, and the cost implication is massive. Thank you, Chair. I'll leave it at that. I will be submitting some written questions that I would then refer to your office for them to please to respond during the period. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Just for your own noting, we are in the process of liaising with the Department of Transport to get them to come and account on some of the allocations that have been made, for certainly in much of the special appropriation and some of the adjustments. If there's a budget vote that has seen significant increase, it's certainly been transport, so we can really delve deeper into that particular matter. Honorable Kaleka Mazibuko, over to you. You are recognized.
Thank you very much, Chair. Chair Ndimlo, may I request that I switch off my camera so that I am audible enough, because in my village, the network is very poor. They have not yet installed my Wi-Fi.
No, that is acceptable, honorable member. You can switch off your video and proceed.
Thank you very much, Chair. Chairperson, I might sound like a broken record when it comes to my concern about economic growth. I think I've raised this in another platform, maybe yesterday, I think. Is because my worry is that even if we can come with all interventions in the planet, but if our economy is struggling for different reasons, that would be like a dream. And I think, Chair, it is important that we prioritize inclusive growth and industrialization. And therefore, my question to National Treasury would be, why does the 2026 Division of Revenue then continue to reflect contractionary fiscal bias instead of reflecting expansionary developmental spending, given that there are noticeable real declines in some allocations to the different spheres of government, and be it national, provincial, and local government? And the Chair, linked to that for me is the economic plan. So, and the economic plan that emphasizes infrastructure-led growth. And how does the 2026 Division of Revenue reforms conditional grant design and technical capacity support to ensure that the municipalities spend their infrastructure-linked conditional grant? The presentation we were given just indicated on the Section 16 update that there are municipalities that are failing to use this grant. Hence, my question. And quickly, Chair, the President has announced that this year, 2026, is the year of fixing and stabilizing local government. So, Chair, how does this 2026 Division of Revenue then concretely address the collapse of revenue collection and financial management in struggling municipalities? Even in the metros, there are metros that are assumed to have the capability or the ability to collect revenue, and yet they are not, because people in the municipalities, even within the metros, are not working. And also there are mushrooming informal settlements of people who are not working, you know. And also on those municipalities that are under Section 139 interventions. And the municipalities also, Chair, are inundated with rapid migration, especially in the metros, as well as urbanization. As I said, the informal settlement growth and economic decline in these municipalities. Then, Chair, still relying on lagging data sets that distort the revenue raising and basic services components of local government equitable share. How does National Treasury then justify allocations to municipalities whose population realities have drastically shifted since the last full census update? I think, I'm not sure the DDT or who was presenting about the census database, and we all know that it is outdated. So does National Treasury accept that outdated data entrenches spatial inequality and underfunds fast-growing urban municipalities while overfunding areas experiencing population outflows? And what is the timeline, Chair, also for revising the formula to reflect updated census and community survey data? And will this be accompanied by transitional protection for destabilized municipalities? Because this is a problem, and it even affects the budget itself, Chair. And Chair, where is the provincial equitable share formula? Is there explicit weighting for industrialization and localization priorities rather than population-based formulas alone? Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Gallagher Mazibugo. Honorable Mkonto, you are recognized.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Chair, honorable members, and our guests from National Treasury and our staff. Chair, my first question will be on the municipal infrastructure grant, those municipalities that have been identified as being incapacitated to spend the MIG. Chair, I want to know from the National Treasury, the institutions that have been identified to assist the municipalities in spending their MIG, that is the MIS and the DBSA and some district municipalities, according to their presentation. To whom do they account, those bodies? And is what is done constitutional? We know there is Section 139 in the Constitution that prescribes as to how should intervention be done towards weak municipalities. The due process is followed as these bodies are identified. My second question, Chair, will be on the comprehensive agri support program. Chair, we need to know if this always addresses the issue of land ownership. There can't be agriculture without land. Maybe the Department of Agriculture has to come to before this committee and so that we are able to ask questions as to exactly how is this grant being spent in the provinces. The 3 million that goes to the human settlement. We have communities, specifically in the Eastern Cape, that were affected by floods. Does this grant help those people to be relocated from those dangerous areas at flood lines to safe places? The last one, Chair, is the school infrastructure grant. We hope this grant is going to build brick and mortar structures. It's not allocated to provinces for them to buy mobile classes, because our observation is that there are no new schools that are being built in this country, specifically in the areas of the previously disadvantaged groups in South Africa. It's only mobile classes that are being purchased, and they are not as durable as a brick and mortar classes. I think the Department of Education has to take a very intentional stance to say, now they have to start building brick and mortar structures, Chair. The last one, Chair, is the rebuilding of Parliament. How much have been allocated and spent since the project started? Because this financial year, we are told 2.1 billion is being allocated. And then this project, Chair, it seems to be no end is being seen about it, but a lot of money is being allocated. If we can just be told as to how much has been allocated from the beginning and how much maybe is still going to be allocated in the medium term. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Mkonto. Honorable Gallagher Mazibuko, may I ask you to keep your device muted when it comes back and on and off it? It does interfere. May I recognize Honorable Bateman, who is next? Thank you, Honorable Bateman.
Thanks very much, Chair. And good morning to everyone. I just want to, I think I've largely covered. I really just have two questions. The one is a request just for more information. So on the special appropriation bill, we're being asked to support quite large funding requests, but very, very scant information provided in the documentation around each of the line items. There are things that we've spoken about, but I think we need more in terms of more substantiation of how the numbers have been derived and exactly how the money is going to be spent. So I think that really relates, and it's not the first time that this has happened. Maybe this is just what's become the norm for the committee, but I feel we owe it to the South African people to be able to do more of a deep dive into the numbers, and at the moment it's very, 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 very scant. So I would ask the Treasury to go away and provide us with proper information around each of these items and proper documentation around each of the items, so that we can provide a more detailed analysis and understanding of why and how these amounts are being requested of the fiscus. And then my second point really relates to education. And in education, there's a formula that's based on the numbers of pupils, both in terms of the population estimates and in terms of the numbers of learners enrolled in schools. But the actual total quantum of money is largely determined by the previous year plus inflation. And we know our education is really, really struggling. And I would like a greater understanding of what it actually would cost us to fix education. Why is our education in such a poor state, and how do we fix it? What's it going to cost? And maybe the areas where we are very wasteful, and we can save in order to redirect towards those areas that are very much under-resourced. But can we have a bit of a zero-based, bottom-up approach to understand what it's going to take to get our education system really working well? Thanks.
Thank you, Honorable Bateman. Honorable Ntuli, you are recognized.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. My greetings to you and my honor and my colleagues. And one would also like to welcome all the presentations. I just want to ask one question on also emphasize something on the infrastructure and local government. It's just one question on youth employment and skills, considering that unemployment remains structurally high. How does this 2026 division of revenue actively integrate youth employment targets across provincial budgets beyond the presidential employment and EPWP type temporary programs? And on the infrastructure and local government stabilization, I just like to emphasize that on MIC, please, the monitoring and evaluation issues should be strengthened, because there are still there are many white elephants standing there for years, and people were just in a hurry to appoint and spend for their own interest, not for service delivery purposes. I thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Ntuli. May I recognize Honorable Sigete?
Thank you, Chair. Let me also welcome the presentation done by National Treasury. Chair, can I mute my video?
As handsome as you are, that is also acceptable, Honorable Member. You can mute your video.
Thanks, Chair. Chair, I have two questions which I want to raise, but let me welcome first the presentation. My questions will be on debt service cost against development, and my other question will be a public investment multiplier. Yes. On debt service cost, Chair, the debt service costs now crowd out frontline services. What is Treasury's long-term strategy to reverse this structural squeeze beyond fiscal tightening? And my second question, Chair, will be on the public investment multiplier. Has National Treasury conducted an economic multiplier analysis of proposed 2026 division of revenue allocations? If not, Chair, why not? But if, what is the projected growth impact? That's my two questions, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Sigete. Let me recognize Honorable Siati.
Thank you, Chair. Let me greet colleagues on the platform, those from the National Treasury. Chair, I would also like to just remain unseen because of similar problems with the web. So mine will be around the areas of the youth employment and skills, the state capacity and the professionalization, the informal economy support, and the health sector financing reform. So considering, Chair, that unemployment remains structurally high, how does this 2026 division of revenue actively integrate youth employment targets across provincial budgets beyond the presidential employment and EPW type of programs? Then, since the NC's NEC priorities 2026 stress building a capable state, why does the wage bill debate dominate this 2026 division of revenue, while technical capacity in engineering, planning, and project management remains severely underfunded? And if National Treasury recognizes informal sector importance, why are there no structural conditional grants in this 2026 division of revenue aimed at formalization of pathways, macro manufacturing hubs, and township economies Then the last one, Chair, is with regards to the NHI, the National Health Insurance being a strategic priority of government. How does the 2026 Division of Revenue prepare provinces for this funding model transition instead of perpetuating provincial fragmentation? And that will be it from my side. And thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. Let me recognize lastly Honorable Mwani.
Thank you so much, Chairperson. It's me here, Chair. I'm not sure if I'm showing. Oh, can I put it off, Chair? It's myself. Yeah?
Well, I'm glad you're not the spokesperson, but it is yourself. You can proceed.
Okay. No, thank you so much. I've been largely covered by by my colleagues on some of the questions, more especially, Chair, on the issue of outdated data that is used by National Treasury on equitable share or allocations, more especially for local government. You see, this then leads to also outdated indigent registers at local government level, because we don't have an updated information or updated statistics from Stats SA. I want to then check what is it that they're doing to address this. How are they going about mitigating this issue here? And two, the provincial allocations, Chair. I want to check, Chair, on the provinces where, more especially, or for example, KZN. I know that Department of Education has been met with serious issues of non-payment of contractors and non-payment of creditors. Also, the dilapidated infrastructure in that province, the schools. Also, Department of Transport has had serious issues with regards to non-payment of contractors. Then the question is on the allocation on provinces, and then how is National Treasury planning to deal with such? Because the problem now is no longer on the local government that are not capable to use this grant efficiently as per the terms of these grants, like your MIG or MIG. So how do you plan then to deal with the provinces that are really not performing and are not delivering as expected or per their mandate? Number three, Chair, I want to check on the issue of illegal immigrants in the country that are continuing to erode our fiscus, because we end up having to support or end up having to service these illegal immigrants in our departments, whereas there is already a shortage or limitation of resources because of population within the country. And then there's this number that is unaccounted for of illegal immigrants that comes in now and needs our services or require our services within our departments. Then how is National Treasury dealing with that? Or are they ignoring that there's so much number within the country that needs services within our departments? And the decrease in the allocation for higher education, what has led to the decrease on the allocation? How is that justified? Because already we have a huge number of students who have not been able to access these funds to go to school, and also some have no places to sleep. There's issue of accommodation. And then if we see now that there's going to be a decrease on the allocation, then it further pulls, or it further makes the issue even worse. So how are they what's the reason? What is the rationale on the decrease on the budget for higher education? And I want to ask on the backlog, because I've been asking parliamentary questions on the Department of Land Restitution and the Land Affairs. There's huge backlogs of land claims dating from some before 1998. Now, I want to ask then, how is it justified that there's so much backlog and yet that department gets allocated such a limited amount of money? Like, what's the correlation between what they're required to be paying out and the amount of money that they get to be allocated? I want to ask from National Treasury, how are they dealing with that? And the Bella Act, do we have an allocation for the Bella Act? Because I know that last discussion on the budget, I asked the same question as to, okay, do we have funds that follows the act now? Because I see that from this budget, there's nothing that was said about the Bella Act. So really, I want to know what's happening with that one. Thank you so much, Chair. Those are my.
Thank you very much, honorable members. I have a few questions on my own that I wanted just to put before National Treasury. The first speaks to the broader assumptions that National Treasury make. It's difficult. The budget is an end product built on a number of key assumptions. And the one assumption is demographics. Naturally, I would imagine you are projecting where the South African population is aging or not aging, what is the life expectancy, and therefore might give you an indicator as to where you want to invest in your grants, etc. I'd like to get an understanding as to some of those assumptions. The second assumption that I want to assume you've taken is you've taken a fairly modest inflationary projection, assuming that as the current monetary policy proposes, that adjustment has been made from 1 to 3. I'm making the assumption that if you are building your budgeting mechanism on that basis, which is a fair enough assumption to make, you are dealing on a global environment of low inflation, low interest rates. I guess the question becomes, given that assumption, is that the basis upon which you've calculated where the fuel levy must sit and what then happens to administered costs as a result, not only for consumers, but also for government departments? There will be, I would argue, additional pressure on inflation on the basis of the fuel hike that you've put on the table, or fuel tax that you've put on the table, and whether there's room for adjustment on that issue. Because if you put a fuel levy additional to an increase that Eskom are proposing, additional to municipal costs, I would argue that the assumption on inflation may not necessarily hold, but I'd be interested to hear your point of view on that. There is an assumption on GDP growth and GDP growth projections. And so I'd like to, of course, you've projected it over the medium term, but perhaps maybe we need to have a discussion about gross capital formation, because I would argue that the rate of investment in South Africa is relatively low, which will impact that. And I ask the questions on assumptions, and there may be many others. Of course, you would have hedged the currency, you've hedged a strong rand, perhaps. And so I'm asking if that's an assumption you've made or not. And of course, naturally, the rand is severely impacted by the results that took place this weekend between Kaizer Chiefs and Orlando Pirates. And I do caution Orlando Pirates supporters to not celebrate that win too seriously, because already we are starting to see the deterioration of currency as a result to that outcome. Or maybe others would argue maybe it's driven more by the war, less by the. But anyways, we can discuss that assumption in due course. So that is my one question. I'd like for National Treasury to perhaps consider putting together a presentation that answers these questions, because every budget cycle we go through, we kind of go through it with the assumptions known to National Treasury, not known to Parliament, and as a net effect of that, it means that we have to come to the same conclusions you've drawn without knowing what your assumptions are. So that's the one. The second is, on some key issues, it is typically split up in the one rand, of course, money is spent on debt, and the other is on the social wage in and of itself. For 61 cents of that, 21 cents goes to debt servicing, 61 towards the social wage. And I would assume the balance effectively is cost of employees and other investment. Now, if you take that same, if you like, pie chart of allocation of money, my deep concern is you have made a decision, and a very important decision, to expand the social relief of distress grant over the medium term. Now, that becomes a permanent feature, which means that in essence, and I'd like you to dispute the assumption, the state then acts effectively as a glorified employment agency. It allocates money to education for the increase of the cost of employees. And so you've got a ballooning, if you like. And I'm not anti-teachers. I'm the first one to fight for teachers. But I can't make the point enough that I think agencies and all sorts of that are cost drivers in the cost of employees that are effectively not adding anything to, they're not contributing much. But my point is, sure, fair enough, you can employ more teachers, more nurses, more all of that, but you keep that view that the cost of employees are a fundamental driver. The second is that the state keeps people at home by a type of grant or another. And then if in small sections, there are aspects of economic investment, but they are insufficient to be able to have real meaningful stimulus for economic growth. So effectively, the 1 rand that is spent is really creating the state as an employment agency. Either you are at home through grants or at work through as a public servant. But in the main, when I look at the 2.67 trillion rand, that is effectively the biggest driver that goes into those two much items. So I'd like to understand whether there's a different view about that graph, because when I looked at the local government equitable share formula, it is something like 1% of that goes towards economic activity. Now, I'm wanting to understand, with that investment, there can be no doubt that the impact of municipalities on economic development is understated and yet profound. The reality of it is that job drivers are, in the main, where people, have got poor education, but in another assumption is the fact that when you look at rural economic development, it's municipalities that eventually can't supply water to Clover or to Ever, that those businesses shut down. So I want to understand, how do we collectively begin to table a budget that talks to job drivers rather than, because I also do think that institutions like provinces, in their allocation of their education share, some of that must be building of new schools, etc. But the priority isn't always on that, because provinces have the pressure of trying to employ more teachers, etc. So I want to understand that. And then the third question is a presentation on TARS. I'd like for National Treasury to be able to, at our next engagement, we must look at the broad TARS. You've made a bold assumption that there are savings born out of TARS, but again, I'm not sure, I might have missed it, whether it's been put on the table or on some of the items that are put forward. And then I think that sort of, and then the trains coming down the track. Is there enough thinking about how do we review climate change budgeting, because that is going to be a permanent feature in the next while, and whether we've began to make adjustments towards that? Because when I look at the budget in total, the adjustments, especially in the special appropriations or in any other, happen in a few departments, but rarely there isn't a sort of shake-up that is similar to the politics where you ended up with a GNU. There isn't a shake-up in the budget itself. It looks like it adjusts a majority of departments for CPI and then makes special appropriations in a few, and then adjusts others like transport or 5 departments I'd sort of looked at in much more significant ways. Now, we have to really think hard about certain things that are maybe not workable. Maybe just to pronounce on my politics, I'm not a fan of provinces. I think provinces are a waste of money in certain instances because their functions are concurrent powers. And so I do think you are bloating up administration in these provinces. But that's a political discussion, that's why I caveat it that way, so that it's not a question that National Treasury needs to respond to. So I put that some of those questions before you and will allow now National Treasury to be able to respond. If you can be brief, knowing that this is one of a few interactions we're going to have. Later on, we're going to look at some of the questions that speak to the appropriation bill. Today, we look at really the division of revenue bill. I guess my last question would be, is there thinking really around what happens when the white paper on local government, and I'm not sure when that will be finalized, adjusts the 90-10 assumption? Is there budgeting for that? And will National Treasury be able to share with me and this committee what this multi-year wage, or what the wage deal assumes in the medium term? I'm not sure what the agreement was. I might have missed it in the public pronouncements, but what is that? What is the required, if you like, what is the adjustment over the medium term on the wage deal? Because I heard one of the presenters rate that they've made adjustment for that. I'm just not sure what the current rate is set at. Let me leave it at those questions and allow National Treasury to respond. Thank you.
And I hope there's no response on your referral to the weekend, Chair. Yes, to
No,
Muda.
I'm concerned, Honorable Member, that there are Orlando Pirates supporters who are celebrating too much. And I'm saying to them that the affordability crisis is about to deepen as a result of them inflicting wounds on Kaizer Chiefs. Kaizer Chiefs is a national asset. The rand is dependent on it. That's all I was alluding to, Honorable Member.
Yeah, good morning, Chair. My name is Edgar Sishi. I am the DDG, Budget Office in the National Treasury, but I am in this meeting also in my capacity as the acting DG of the National Treasury during the course of this week while the DG and the Minister are out of the country. I don't have any comments on the impact, either current or future, of the Soweto Derby, so I will stay out of that one. With your permission, Chair. I do want to point out that I note that some of the questions that have been raised are questions that will also be answered or be discussed in the committee hearing on the fiscal framework, which will take place in the joint committee hearings, as I understand it, in the schedule next week. So, but happy to go through some brief highlights there, but I would highlight to members that next week there will be a full presentation with responses to public hearings where it'll be more detailed than what I'm about to say. I think first of all, on the question around how we see the overall budget from the perspective of the idea of austerity, I think as indicated in the meeting with the Minister last week, we have a different perspective. What we've tried to do is to, over the last couple of years, limit and as far as possible, eliminate the need for spending cuts in the budget. And we've come to a point where, because we've been able to table a budget that stabilizes debt as a percentage of GDP in line with the fiscal strategy, we have not introduced cuts to the budget that I knew over and above what we had to do in the past, besides the technical adjustments for inflation or some of these reschedulings that we've had to do, or addressing some technical errors and issues that were outlined during the presentation. The issue around assumptions, Chair, yeah, we obviously, we publish in the budget review in chapter 2. I would refer honorable members to the assumptions that we use, the high-level assumptions that we use to put together the macro economic forecast. We do publish those assumptions. And in addition to that, we do have interactions with various institutions, including those that come here to Parliament, and we talk to them offline about our thinking about some of the things, even beyond the assumptions that we publish on page 19 of the budget review. But I would refer honorable members to those assumptions, and we could have even further discussions about that if time permits. Obviously, assumptions around inflation, consumer inflation, are driven by a number of things, and the Reserve Bank can also talk more about that. And that includes the pass-through effects as it relates to the currency. So when the rand weakens substantially, that obviously impacts on inflation. When it strengthens, inflation diminishes. I think at this point, we've had, over the last probably 15 months, have had a good run as South Africa. Even besides the inflation target decision, South Africa's inflation outlook has trended downwards, really on its own. I think in sentiment towards the country has improved somewhat over the last while. That's driven the currency and made it stronger. Yes, of course, there's been dollar weakness, and that's had an impact. But there's no question in our conversations and engagements, both domestically and globally, sentiment towards South Africa has certainly improved. We've had a ratings upgrade. We've had a grey list, removal from the grey list. All of these things have been positive. And of course, the fiscus has improved compared to where we were in previous years. And what that means is that the rand by itself has been stronger in any event and has outperformed most of the emerging market currencies, and that's helped with inflation. Similarly, with GDP growth, of course, the events that are taking place in the Middle East at the moment were not part of ours, or for that matter, anybody's assumptions when we put together the macros that informed this budget. We'll talk about it more probably next week and in future meetings, Chair, but let me just make one point to say that what we've tried to do is we've tried to improve we've tried to strengthen the fiscus, not just for the purposes of stabilizing debt for our own sake as a country, but also for the purposes of improving our insulation against shocks, which at the moment are coming almost entirely from the global environment. We've achieved good stability internally. We've got a long way to go. Let me be very clear that we know that we're nowhere near where we need to be, and we really are underperforming our aspirations, but we think that stability is a necessary condition for getting there. And in that regard, the improvements in logistics and improvements in electricity supply are important. But we are experiencing shocks, and those shocks are coming from the global environment, which we don't control. And those shocks will work their way out over the coming weeks and months. The conflict in the Middle East, it depends on how long it lasts. We really simply don't know at this point, but we will continue updating both our own assumptions and updating Parliament as and when we get information that is reliable. And in that regard, we're in the same boat as everybody else really around the world. Let me just say on the issue of the wage bill and how that interacts with everything else in the budget around how we're thinking about investment, how we're thinking about our various other obligations, including the social wage. I think there's various aspects to this perspective, or different perspectives to this. One, we are trying to increase both the allocations and the commitments to public infrastructure by crowding in the private sector while increasing our own allocations. We now, for the first time in this decade, have capital budgets that grow faster than debt service costs, more than twice as fast, actually, as debt service costs. So I hear honorable members who say that, the numbers need to be higher. We agree. The numbers need to be higher. We agree that we're on our way to getting there. But, in terms of being able to make progress, we're trying to make that progress within the limits that we face at the moment. And so we agree that we need to get to a high level, but that's something that we're going to get there as and when we are improving the broader macro fiscal position. But I think it is important, and it needs to be acknowledged, that we are tabling a budget where capital budgeting is, for the first time in a decade, growing more than twice as fast as debt service costs. And I think, in fairness, that's an important thing. And while we need to do more, that's an important development in the budget. And that's how we think about it, to you, Honorable Chair, and your question. I do want to also point out that when it comes to wages, even within wages, it depends on how you see it. Yes, we have been very open about saying we want to keep the wage bill under control, but a big part of the wage bill funds education, salaries for teachers. We consider that that is an investment in human capital that remains important. So that balancing act is important in that regard. On reviewing climate change budgeting, yes, we agree, and we have signed on to a global protocol in this regard, and we are working on a climate budget tagging process, which will allow us over time to get better information on how government is funding issues related to that. Because money is sitting in different parts of the system. Municipalities are spending on environmental health, provinces are spending, national departments are spending, non-budgetary institutions of the state are also spending. So it's going to take a little bit of time for us to get that data together and to be able to deploy a system of budget tagging throughout the system, both inside government and in other non-budgetary institutions of the state. Chair, I'll stop there, and I'm going to ask, with your permission, for the team, particularly from the Intergov division, but also some colleagues from the Public Finance division are here to address the specific questions that have been raised by members. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair and honorable members. So I'll ask Sadesh to quickly talk about what are we doing to help municipalities with regards to revenue collection, all our interventions, including smart meter program and all of that. I'll ask Dr. Pakis and Mr. Mudukanele to quickly just summarizing, as the Chair has requested, on the on the provincial equitable share formula. Dr. Pakis, the mix 6B, there's been a number of questions, and the formula as well. So whatever that you leave behind, Wendy will add, and then I'll respond to generally how division of revenue is kind of supporting jobs and all of that. Thank you. Korisan quickly, sorry, Sadesh, Korisan, and then Letsepa, in that order. Thank you.
Good morning, honorable members, DDG and DG. It's Sadesh Ramjatan. Chair, with your permission, my camera is dysfunctional at the moment. I hope you don't mind me responding without my camera. Chair, am I audible?
Yeah, audible, Sadesh, you can go ahead.
Thank you, DDG. So, Chair, with regards to revenue management in municipalities, and particularly around the collection in municipalities, we know that many municipalities are struggling with not just issuing a bill to the customers, but the collection of that bill by the municipalities themselves. So what we've done, we've structured our support to municipalities in a couple of ways. Firstly, in municipalities on the debt relief program, the municipal debt relief program, we have provided them with technical support through the Municipal Finance Improvement Program to assist these municipalities to deal with some revenue and budget related matters at the ground level. Together with that, these advisors that are placed at municipalities, aligned to these municipalities, help municipalities firstly on the policy development. They help them with structuring proper standard operating procedures. They help them with tariff compilation, and we've got a tariff tool that we help municipalities with. We also help municipalities with indigent management, and then a recon of what's in the general valuation role, as well as what's on the billing system. All of these areas are targeted towards assisting and improving revenue collection in a municipality. Underpinning all of these areas is the controls that are in the municipal space that help municipalities collect what is due to them. Apart from the support that we're giving through the MFIP advisors and all the areas that I've alluded to, we are also supporting municipalities with a smart prepaid solution through the grant funding, the smart meter grant that's available. And this smart prepaid solution helps municipalities bring money up front before the services are provided to a customer, rather than postpaid, which could be 3 months, 90 days, or sometimes never from customers. So the smart solution is a solution, an end-to-end solution, helping municipalities with dealing with bypasses, tampers, and sometimes customers that were never billed at all in the past. And we could see through this solution in municipalities, there has been about 14% improvement on average on the collection and the revenue intake in these municipalities. That has been instrumental in many municipalities that we supported, starting to pay the likes of Eskom and the bulk suppliers for what's due on the current account. So those are some of the things that we've been helping municipalities with. We are also dealing with some of the stakeholders, the likes of COCTA and SALGA, DEE, so that we combine our efforts around revenue management, so that we don't go out individually to municipalities to support them. It's a comprehensive, consolidated support that we go in as government to a municipality with all our resources coupled into one package, so that there's no confusion on the ground of what needs to be done. And that's how we've been dealing with revenue management and assisting municipalities with collection on the ground. Thank you, DDG, and thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. As per the DDG's instruction, I'll deal with the provincial equitable share questions. So the first one that was recorded was from Honorable Talega on the inclusion of industrialization in the equitable share, or I would believe as a component of the equitable share. Largely, in the main, the equitable share structure or the components included are largely driven for the social sector, as you'll see in the education and health components, given the functions of provinces generally. But that doesn't mean through the equitable share or through other mechanisms we cannot support industrialization within provinces. We have added money, for example, for special economic zones in the past through the equitable shares and add-on. The most recent one was for Kruger, for industrialization, and we do support the movement of special economic zones within provinces. So in it being included as a component would be something that given the functions, the general functions of provinces. Something to think about. But generally, that does not mean that we don't support industrialization within provinces. There was also a question on the school infrastructure backlogs to build brick and mortar. It is indeed correct that within the school infrastructure backlogs grant and the education infrastructure grant, we do prioritize the building of brick and mortar schools for sustainability. So we do make sure that the department as well as provinces don't really invest too much in these temporary structures, but have more sustainable concrete structures. With regards to how does the 2026 Division of Revenue assist provinces in rolling out NHI, we do have an NHI grant, both indirect and direct. For example, with the NHI direct grant has been put in place to assist provinces for strategic purchasing of services. As you know, within the NHI has a huge focus on strategic purchases of medical services. So that grant is still in place to assist provinces in doing that. There's also indirect NHI grant that also assists. One of the components is for health facility or the upgrading of health facilities to ensure that they are up to standard as they get into the NHI system. We also have a lot of engagements at provincial level regarding the NHI. We have a committee within the Technical Committee on Finance with provinces on the implementation and rollout of NHI, and where all these issues that they would have regarding NHI are discussed at length. But in the main, the Division of Revenue still continues to support the rollout and the implementation and the readiness for NHI when it comes. DDG, I'm not sure, but those are the main questions that were raised with regards to the provincial side or regarding the provincial fiscal framework. Thank you.
Thanks, Honorable Chair, for another opportunity. So I'm going to deal with the local government related matters. I'm going to try and just attempt to sum them up, especially those related to the MIG or maybe generally the infrastructure reforms. And I want to make a distinction, Honorable Members, so that I clarify this point quite significantly, because there is a question around the legitimacy and the constitutionality of the proposed reforms. So, honorable members, just drawing from the Constitution, so Section 227 entitles local government to an equitable share, and then so that is clear. So all the municipalities are getting their equitable share because that is really what the Constitution is asking for. However, Section 214, especially 2E, speaks to an efficiency measure within how local government is funded. It requires that the Division of Revenue takes into account the fiscal capacity, efficiency of municipalities and provinces. And this considered as an overall issue. For so long, these municipalities have been inefficient in how they have discharged their functions, and therefore this response is directly a response to try and improve the issue of efficiency. In the past, the municipality would get an allocation. Unfortunately, these allocations would end up paying salaries, substandard work in terms of the procurement processes that have been undertaken. Therefore, the cost of doing nothing has been quite huge. The impact has been felt by the citizens within those municipalities. Now, we had an option here. We have provisions in terms of sections 19 and 20 around the stopping and reallocation. However, even there, when you stop from those that are not spending well. You then give those that are spending well. And when you do that, funds move from those municipalities that are not spending the money, but the need remains on the ground. So these reforms then, honorable members, are legal, and they are trying to then address that issue of inefficiency in as far as these funds are carried out. So in the case of the MIP 6B, there is a question around who is responsible for or accountable for these delivery agents. And yet, because it's a mixed 6B, it is a indirect intervention by the Department of Cooperative Governance. So MISA, the DBSA, and these capable districts actually would then be contracted by the Department of Cooperative Governance, ensuring that there is proper oversight in that space, which is why one of our slides was then speaking to a process that the Department of Cooperative Governance needs to undertake to ensure that there is a general understanding across the stakeholders in terms of who is involved, what their functions are, because these assets will be built in these municipalities where they were originally meant to deliver, but then those municipalities would need to continue with the maintenance. So they are also not isolated in this process. It's just that they will be getting the support from these other various players in the construction of their own assets as well. So that's really where we are heading with that. And the capacity, of course, is something that we feel quite strongly about, to say this intervention should leave these municipalities better off than they were. It is a real concern, honorable members, that there are really some of the districts that are struggling in these spaces. So as a preference, districts that are capable would get the first preference in terms of being tasked with this responsibility. The INEP grant, which is the grant that is managed by the Department of Electricity and Energy, has actually started, where 5 of the municipalities and KZN will be assisted by the district municipalities that they fall under. So there's a MOU that gets to be signed by all the parties in terms of what needs to be put in place and what are the various roles and responsibilities for each of the 3 institutions that are involved in that, meaning it is the national department, the district that has been identified as capable, with the local that it is serving. There are continuous discussions around this so that all the stakeholders know what is expected of them at what point in the process as well. So as a treasury as well, we will be writing to some of these municipalities to clarify from our side in terms of how this is envisaged to work, the reporting and the strengthening thereof. So that honorable members will then assist us in ensuring that those communities there do not suffer as much. The other questions, I think, Honorable Chair, you touched on the white paper processes. We are involved in that process, and there are discussions, obviously, around the policy direction of how we would want to fund the local government going forward, how to explore what is currently working and what is not working. It is not envisaged that the white paper would make a pronouncement on the actual funding that is going to be made available, except that it will really speak to issues around the principles, things like the differentiation that needs to be put into the system and the cross-subsidization. And then the work that the Treasury is doing, which is envisaged to be completed in October so that it can fit into the 2027 budget process, is actually where the quantification of how much would be going to the local government, what the shortage is. And here, honorable members, it's also important to note that the availability of funds to each sphere of government is also a political process which is driven by political priorities. So it would be important to note that, what direction is taken, because to make funding available to another sphere, in a case where the fiscal is constrained, it would mean that other spheres would have to forego something. So that work would also need to just make reference and a reflection on that in terms of, in a case where all three spheres of government are underfunded, what then happens? Exploring alternative revenue raising mechanisms as well, but also assisting in terms of efficiencies. So Sadesh has spoken to the kind of support that is being provided to local government to unlock some of the really funds that are there, but just not being used effectively, where the collection systems have really fallen, and the issue now going into the elections. In the past, we've seen perverse incentives not to collect, which obviously, is creating another culture as well, because if you don't collect towards the election, then we have a bigger problem, because after the election, it becomes difficult to then expect that people would be paying if they know that actually they can get away with not paying at certain times in the system as well. So that honorable members, I think, is the take. There are 21 municipalities, and these 21 honorable members have been charged by the Department of Water and Sanitation for having really failed systems in terms of delivering on those functions. It is true, honorable members, that there's much more dysfunctionality in local government, but there's also the limitation in terms of the kind of support that can be provided through this avenue. So there are discussions that continue to how then do we capacitate MISA, the DBSA, and these districts better so that they can undertake more of some of these functions while we continue to build the necessary capacity within these troubled municipalities themselves. So the 21 is really just the most in dire need within the capacity that the state has. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Just maybe quickly. So on the question first by Honorable Wakelin about upgrades and maintenance, just to say that if you look at the conditional grants, in particular for education and health, so education over the MTF, we've got a budget of just below 50 billion for education infrastructure grant. And just excluding what provinces will add to their from their provincial equitable share on revenue in terms of what they spend on infrastructure, as well as, I mean, if you look at health, they've got the allocation over the MTF for the hospital revitalization grant, which helps with the health facility revitalization grant that helps with the upgrades, maintenance, and new health facilities is got 24 billion over the MTF. And as well as, I think the presentation on Friday that was made by the DG indicated that just for the next financial year, I mean, provinces do have a budget of 74 billion on infrastructure. And therefore, I think the issue that Honorable Mwali was raising about a KZN transport, for example, not able to pay service providers shouldn't be the case, because they do have the grant. And I know for a fact that in the case of KZN transport, it's one of the provincial departments that augment the infrastructure budgets from their own equitable share. So I think that should not be a big issue. On how is division of revenue, I mean, supporting jobs, just to say that obviously, honorable members, the grants or obviously the division of the equitable shares to both spheres, I mean, are unconditional, and the number of initiatives that provinces embark, like I think the point that was made about assisting township economies and all of that, the number of interventions, whether it's the provincial economic development departments in that regard, as well as try to help with the informal sector. So, there is funding that is provided by those departments, and also the provincial public entities. Honorable members will recall that in a number of provinces, we do have development corporations that are tasked with economic development initiatives within provinces. But just to say that on the conditional grant side, as you have noted, I mean, there's quite huge amounts, whether on the provincial side or local government. That's for specific interventions. But along the way, obviously the secondary mandate could be that they end up creating jobs, by implication that if you are building a road, a contractor will have to appoint people to do that, whether it's a school, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's school feeding, you will need the people who come and cook for the children at school. So I think it's kind of implied, but it's not a main objective why those conditional grants particularly are there, but they end up in the process helping, except where it's specific, like the PWP. We know that there ought to be people employed in that spaces, whether it's the education assistant program, and we know that it's been one of the successful presidential employment stimulus programs in the country, that it has been appointing more than 200,000 young people per year. So that those are grants that have been able to help in that regard. I think on the issue of data, outdated data, I think we do accept that, honorable members, that especially for the local government, equitable share is a big problem. But what to address it, doing to address that? So part of it, National Treasury has allocated funding to the SA over the MTF to increase their capacity to ensure that all the important data that is required by the state from their side, they were able to get it on time in particular. But as well as we're trying to have continuous engagement with them to ensure that we really receive this data, because the one for updating the equitable share for local government is really quite overdue. So we do acknowledge and we do accept that it's a big problem. So Honorable Chair, acting DG, that will stop, and then we'll hand over to public finance. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Ohale and Honorable Chair. I hope I'm still audible. I'm going to address few questions very briefly related to the Special Appropriation Bill and other related questions. I'm going to address two, and my colleagues, will address the issue related to PRASA and corridors raised by Honorable Wakeling. And then my colleague Mokhatla will address issues around parliamentary building raised by Honorable Mukonto, and Tovisa will deal with issues of huge backlog on land claims and climate change issues. And lastly, Spencer will then deal with the issue of allocation for Bella. But let me address very briefly the request by Honorable Bateman that we should submit additional details for the Special Appropriation Bill expenditure items. Yes, indeed, we are going to provide through our parliamentary liaison officer the required details for each expenditure item outlined in the Special Appropriation Bill. With regards to the issue of targeted and responsible savings, or TARS, raised by the chair, more information around that is going to be provided when we deal with the Special Appropriation Bill or when consideration of the special appropriation bill is being held. So that is still to come. And then over to you, Pebetse, Mokhatla, Tobisa, Spencer, in that order. Thank you.
Are you able to hear me? Okay, thanks, Mashudu.
Yes, we can hear you. We can hear you.
All right, thanks, Mashudu, and good morning to the meeting. Three things that I'm going to
Can I just ask a quick question? I worry that there may be two devices connected on your side. So one of them, hey?
No, it's only one. I'm wondering what.
Or there's an echo in the system then. So maybe if you are, but you can proceed. I think it'll get better.
Let me try and see. Is it better if the video is off? Is it any different?
I don't know if it's just on my end. So I get the feeling that it keeps breaking up. But Honorable Wakelin, can you hear everything okay?
No, Chair, there's still an echo. We can hardly hear.
Can you proceed now with your
All right,
video off?
with my video. Okay, apologies for the echo. I don't know what could be the problem on my side.
No. Let's return back to you in a bit. We're hearing echoes still. So can I return to you in a bit? Can I ask the next, as indicated by Ohale, can we get the next person to respond, and then we will come back to you because there's still an echo. I apologize.
No problem.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Chairperson and honorable members. I will be responding to the question on the parliamentary building. So the estimated cost of the parliamentary reconstruction is 4.6 billion. We have quarterly meetings with the SteerCom as part of the SteerCom, where we are given progress report. And the last one we had was in November. There are different milestones that have been reached so far, including the pre-construction work, getting approvals for designs, getting the necessary permits, closing some of the routes, and beginning some of the construction. By September 2025, about 1 billion of what the 2.4 that was already allocated was spent. We are due to have another meeting in March where we're going to get a bit more progress in terms of where the construction is. But just to also confirm that the 2.1 billion that is now currently being allocated through the special appropriation bill is the last tranche of what Treasury has made available for Parliament's reconstruction. Thank you very much.
Tobisa.
Thank you so much, Mashudu. Good morning, Honorable Chair and members. I'm going to respond to the two questions that have been posed on the backlog in terms of land claims as well as climate change issues. Apologies, Chair, I'm not able to be on camera. My connectivity is is buffering today. When it comes to the backlog, the National Treasury is continuously engaging with the Department of Land Reform and Rural Development on some of the internal constraints and some of the persistent institutional weaknesses that continue to slow the finalization of claims. While government has not made an outright increase in terms of allocations for restitution as part of this MTF process, we, as part of the broader fiscal consolidation strategy, government has, as the honorable members would be aware, is prioritizing stabilizing debt and containing spending, which therefore also limits the scope of baseline increase across departments. As already alluded, Chair, the program has suffered a lot of inefficiencies in recent years, which is also another added factor to how we approach funding arrangements going forward. Be that as it may, in 2025 adjusted estimates, the National Treasury did approve a rollover of around 647.5 million for the department to settle a court order related to restitution claims, which were coming from the KwaZulu-Natal. And this is hopefully going to accelerate some of the settlements of outstanding claims. Over the MTF period, the agriculture land holding account will be receiving 2.5 billion in terms for approximately acquiring 144,000 hectares, which would have been also outlined in the minister's speech as well as the budget review that was recently tabled. A further 12 billion is available in the baseline of the department for finalization of around 869 restitution claims. We will still continue to engage with the department as part of the formal budget process to address some of these issues and address some of the inefficiencies that have been spoken to as part of the TES initiative. When it comes to climate change related matters, Chair, to supplement some of the issues that have already been outlined by the acting DG, yes, the National Treasury is indeed proceeding with the development of the climate change budget tagging. From a much more broader perspective, the Climate Change Act has been enacted in 2024. And as part of the preliminary work to support the phasing in of the implementation, the department continues to guide provinces and metropolitans and district municipalities in terms of how to meet the statutory planning requirements for the Act. The department, included as part of these activities, is work around the needs and response assessments, which will take place within the first year of the publication of the legislation. From a broader financing strategy, the department is currently in a process of developing a business case and exploring modalities in terms of setting up a climate change response fund. This follows pronouncements that were made by the president in 2024. From a governance point of view as well, there is a process underway to establish the Presidential Climate Commission as a public entity. A business case is currently under development with the assistance of GTEC, which the National Treasury also provides technical support to that process. More specific to the preliminary and early planning activities around the Climate Change Act, the Department of Environmental Affairs has reprioritized at least some 275 million over the MTF towards the implementation of the Act. This particular funding will support capacity building as well as the coordination in relations to the work that is undertaken with provinces and municipalities as part of the required planning instruments across the government system. Thank you so much, Chair. I will conclude there. Thank you.
Thank you, Spencer.
Any more responses?
Good morning, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members, and thanks for the opportunity here. So I'm going to just address the question by Honorable Mwali on the Bella Act. While there isn't a specific allocation that speaks directly to the Bella, to the passing of the Bella Act, there are a couple of things that are notable already in the sector and in the baseline. So even before the passing of the Bella, around 80% of children were accommodated in schools, another 10% in non-government run sites. And it is this 10% additional kids that the sector now needed to make space for, either in schools or in these non-government run sites. We know that provinces already have an existing allocation of about 22 billion for grade R in their respective baselines over the MTEF. And of course, that will now need to be stretched, as well as additional or current allocations of just over 20 billion for learner and teacher support materials and 50 billion for infrastructure requirements. And that's for the whole sector, of course. But the nature of the concurrent functions and the role that provinces have in delivering them requires, of course, that they then have to tailor what they have to respond to their priorities as they arise. And so we're saying that there is this money in the baseline. we are also encouraging and assisting provincial treasuries to help provincial departments to identify other areas where there are inefficiencies that may even be within the provision of learner and teacher support material and infrastructure, amongst others, to be able to redirect savings that can be derived through that task process in provinces towards these other priorities. This, of course, in addition to the 9.9 billion, that's the carry through of the allocation that was made to basic education in the equitable share last in the May budget. And then also a specific allocation for grade R of 342 million, which the basic education sector has said that of all the elements of grade R that need to be addressed, the progressive equalization of these grade R educators in some provinces who are not being paid yet at the level of the teachers, as they are in 5 of the other provinces. That progressive equalization is the priority, and so that 342 million is allocated to start that process. And that's a specific allocation for grade R. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah. Lastly, Pebetse, if you can connect.
Then I've put my headphone on and I'm just trying to see if it's any better. Is it any better?
Yeah.
Okay. No, thank you then. So the questions I have here relate to PTNG plus and this one on settlement as well. So on the PTNG part, the reduction proposed over the MTF amounts to 8.3 billion, but that still leaves in the baseline of 5.7 in 26-27, 4.5 billion 27-28, and 3.7 in the outer year. So the plan here is, of course, the reduction follows the fact of that implementation has been poor and drastically poor in many municipalities. The plan now is that for 25-26, no new infrastructure will be introduced, but at the same time, both the department, the municipalities, and the treasury will work together around finding ways to still continue with an integrated transport systems and see how obligations that continue to exist will be funded, and whether there is also possibility to merge with other grants within the sector, but explore ways to make sure that whatever spending that we have in the long run still address the agenda and also does so efficiently. So for the commitments that are already agreed between the municipalities and other service providers and also the industry, those will then be considered within this financial year. It will be where possible renegotiation will take place. So the cut should not disadvantage any municipality's operation in any bad way. On the PRASA side, Honorable Wakelin asked a question that is multi-pronged, both talking to the signaling and the rolling stock. In the special appropriation, the allocation proposed is specifically for the rolling stock. So the rolling stock, we knew even by the time of budget that we have a shortfall in that area. So for 25-26, the department was allocated 5.7 billion when their need was actually about 11.5 billion. This relates to the rolling train sales that they need to obtake from Givela, and without settling this contractual obligation, it puts Givela in a difficult position because there's a minimum number of trains that have to be produced from the plant. So there are already liquidity challenges within Givela arising from this non-payment. So the purpose here is to settle their contractual obligations with Givela, while also trying to find mechanisms to reduce the number of trains of take annually in line with what is available fiscally. On the signaling component that you ask about, in 2025, in the 25-26 budget, provisional allocation was made for signaling to complement what is already allocated. Because of contractual delays on the part of PRASA, the in-year allocation was not made for signaling, but the budget they had already for signaling we used to improve signaling. So for 26-27, the budget has been increased significantly to 7 billion, and then it goes to 8 billion in 27-28 and 15 billion in 28-29. Work is underway between Treasury, Department of Transport, and PRASA to fast-track the contracting of service providers on the signaling part. And there's definitely an agreement that if this is fixed on time, or it has to be fixed on time to enable regularity of trains across the 8 corridors. So in terms of the targets that PRASA has set for itself and the department has set for itself, we expect an increase in ridership because we expect the signaling to be resolved for the most part in 26-27. So on the human settlement part, the Honorable Mkondo asked about the shift from HSDG to the informal settlement grant as to whether it would help relocate people affected by disasters to safe places. On that one, I just wanted to make 2 or 3 points that the shift from HSDG to informal settlement is to help the provinces and municipalities strengthen and finalize the formalization of informal settlements that they have already started. And they did so because of the pressure they foresee on that side. Despite this, however, we need to be aware that it seems like the incentives in the informal settlement grants have not been aligned in a way that municipalities have not been doing adequate work to prevent informal settlement creation. And again, they have also not been doing adequate work to build in infrastructure, long-term infrastructure that support the sustainable neighborhoods in that regard. We are also concerned, at least from the National Treasury side, that where you have communities that are, or new buildings that are put in areas that are not necessarily safe, we already create a demand for emergency resettlement and emergency funding. So what we are discussing with the department is that, and we're hoping that it will infiltrate through all the grants that they have, is to ensure that disaster risk prevention, as espoused in the Disaster Management Act, is taken into account in all township design and in all settlements that is created, so that we will reduce the level of disaster that we have to be dealing with, that we need to be managing. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. That's all from our side. Yeah. Thank you.
Oh, you have Honorable Wakelin, you have a question or you have an intervention?
Yeah, no, it's not an intervention, Chair. Just 2 matters. The one is, it became now very clear that PRASA is something that we need to interrogate more. I have submitted a written question to your office this morning. I would request further detail around PRASA. To me, and I said it to you last week, Chair, there are 2 matters that is critical for us to track this year. The one is bad project management, and the other one is bad contract management. In this case, both of them apply. And I'm going to be quite clear with you, Chair, that I'm very concerned about this whole project around special appropriation for PRASA. But be that as it may, Chair, I did request that what she said this morning, just reply for us in detail, in the detailed information around the PRASA. Thank you, Chair. Then we can further deliberate.
As I did indicate, Honorable Wakelin, that the transport and certainly that of PRASA is a priority that we're working on ensuring scheduling on that score. So on that one issue, we are confirmed, but the information being brought on today, that's that. As far as your question is concerned, I will work through it and make sure in a composite manner we can send some to National Treasury. What I might request is that there may be also a few representatives from National Treasury when we meet with PRASA, so that we can take the matter with as much detail as possible. But let me thank National Treasury for that. We've run a little bit out of time because I would have wanted for some follow-ups, but we've run out of time. It's we understand when you play for the clock, but I will certainly submit any other further questions at another point. And thank you for the indication, acting DG, that there will be a session that will be dealt with in the fiscal framework going on. And I have read some of the indicators on chapter 2 of the budget book, but I just wanted to, or at least of the estimates, I just wanted to get some more granular information about certain aspects, but I'll put those also in writing. Let me thank National Treasury for your presentation. Much appreciated. I will excuse the National Treasury. Honorable members, we've got a few minutes left. I'd like to deal with some of the matters that are pertaining to our committee at this point. Let me, Mashile, the one item that is next on the agenda is the adoption of our report on our trip to India. Is that possible for you to present those? I will assume, honorable members, you have read this report. And as per the request, this is not the time or the place to make substantive inputs because we'd made this request a while ago. So now is a question of maybe if there are any textual edits that a member would like to make, and this report was circulated to members a while ago. Can I just check if we can go through some of these? Honorable Waitlin, I see your hand is up. Is this a legacy hand or a fresh hand? You are muted, Honorable.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, Chair, the report is just missing a very pertinent matter. It's a matter around made in India, whereas that one of the biggest export commodities for them are suits, and we have not include that into our reports. I would request that we consider that, Chair. Thank you.
Yes, it'll be in the recommendations section of the issue that you have put on the report. Can we go through? Well, there were other components that were also there that should be reflected on. But can we go through to the report and go at it as expeditiously as possible, Denver? Let's go to page 1. Are there any objections? Honorable members, if you can, if there's a section you want to just speak out because it gets a bit tricky on Zoom to pass a report, page 2. Page 3. Page 4. Page 5. Page 6. Page 7, if I can read it correctly. Page 8. Page 9. And then we are at page 10. Page 11. Page 12.
Yes, Chair.
Yes, Honorable Bateman.
So with regard to at the bottom of that, the last recommendation 3, studying India's policy framework and the Atmanirbhar Bharat to strengthen local procurement, industrialization, and promote localization. In one of the committee meetings, one of the point that they made was that India first saw accelerated growth through liberalization, privatization, and globalization, LPG. And they also emphasized the importance of driving down the cost of doing business. And then they said that localization was something that came along later. And also it's in the context of the size of their domestic market as well, that was also an advantage for them. So I just thought we should perhaps say something about just those points: liberalization, privatization, and globalization, and driving down the cost of business as amongst the keys to their economic growth, and that the localization strategies came later.
Yes, Honorable Bateman, I wanted to request perhaps maybe in that instance you would need to, I take that point. Can you send it in text into the group? Because as I did say, the report was circulated a while ago and that point should have been made at that time. So will you send it in the WhatsApp group and then we can edit it in as far as some of the discussion points? I'm not sure it fits into recommendations per se, because that's a different discussion. Is that okay with you?
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't want to have this as a recommendation that we say to go and look at localization, because I think that would actually really be a bit of a misleading recommendation on its own. I think if what they're saying is that the economic growth came first through liberalization, privatization, and globalization, that localization was a more recent development, that actually should be stressed. It's not. And also the point about driving down the cost of doing business as well.
Yeah, that's fine. Will you put together a short paragraph? I don't think there's a member who objects to the issue, and we'll put it in part of the finding. Is that if you can, and then just send it through. Is that all right?
Yep. I'll put something onto the group, sure.
And then if we can, then go to page 13. Is there anything else, Honorable Member, on page 14? Because I think that is the last bit. It is page 13. Okay. Honorable members, with the addition of the line that Honorable Bateman has just made, can we move for the adoption of the report? I'd been through this a few times. I see Honorable Wakelin has raised a thumbs up, which means he moves for the adoption. Is there a member who would like to second the adoption of the report? I see Honorable Sigedez beat you to it, Honorable Kalega Mazibuko. With those two, with that addition, we'll put the text on the table. The report is duly adopted. Denver, there are a number of minutes that we needed to consider. We were deferring those from the last meeting. Can you put the minutes next on the screen, if you wouldn't mind? Honorable members, these are minutes from the 5th of November in a committee meeting, obviously, with the Public Service Commission. These were largely from last year. I have read through them, tried to make sure there are no spelling or contextual issues, but I think they capture the sentiment. So what I'm going to do is go through them page by page. They just go through attendance, page 1. Can we go through page 2? Page 3. Page 4. Page 5. Page 6. Page 7. I think it concludes on page 7. Right. Honorable members, with those, I didn't hear any member raise points of consideration. Is there a member who will move for the adoption of the minutes of the 5th of November?
I move, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Wakelin. Is there a seconder to this regard?
Sigede, Chair, second.
Thank you, Honorable Sigede. Those minutes are thus duly adopted. Can we move to the next set, Denver? Honorable members, these are minutes of the meeting held on the 14th of November. On the MTBPS. Can I ask, let's go through them, page 1. Page 2. Page 3. Still page 4. Can keep going then, these are just attendance registers. Page 5. Page 6 now, yeah. Page 7. Page 8. Page 9. Page 10. And then 11. 12. I think that concludes that. Honorable members, is there a member who will move for the adoption of those minutes if there are no amendments?
Honorable Secretary, Chair, move for the
Thank you.
adoption.
Thank you, Honorable Skede. Is there a member who would like to second the adoption of the minutes?
Honorable Seate, seconds.
Thank you, Honorable Siate. And then we move to the last set, if I'm not mistaken, Denver. Honorable members, these are minutes of the meeting on the 16th of November. You can go through page 1, page 2, still announced, and then page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8, page 9, and then page 10, page 11, page 12. I think that concludes that. Honorable members, these are the minutes with our meeting with the PBO. Is the member who, without, if there are no amendments, the member would like to move? Honorable Kalega Mazibuko.
I move for the adoption of the minutes, Chair, as a true reflection.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. Is there a member who would like to second?
Yes, Chair, Mkonto. I second the move. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Mkonto. It's what Kaiser Chiefs don't seem to get right, which is how do you have different combinations up front? You see, you start DA, ANC, then you go ANC, EFF. It's a different tactic all the time. But honorable members, it's clear that I'm still traumatized by this weekend's events, so I'll talk about them until the rand strengthens. I think that concludes all the minutes. I've just got a few announcements to make. Or are there more, Denver?
Sorry, Chair, only the last one of the 19th.
Oh, I apologize. These are minutes of the meeting on the 19th of November. Can we go through it on page 1? Page 2? Page 3? Page 4? Page 5? Page 6? Page 7? And then page 8? I think that concludes that. Is there a member who would like to move for the adoption of the minutes?
Yes, Chair, Honorable Ntuli would like to move. I didn't move previously because remember I wasn't yet a member. Now I can.
Oh, okay. Yes, Honorable
Thank
Ntuli.
you.
I just want to check if you were present at that meeting.
Oh, yeah, I think I was. It was. So, let me see. When did I start? Oh, not yet.
No, Honorable Ntuli, let's not be unparliamentary. Is there
Okay.
another member who would like to move?
Oh, no, it was in December.
Tomorrow
Thank
you
you.
can proceed.
Thank you.
Is there a member?
Let me move in solidarity with Honorable Ntuli.
Thank you, Honorable Kalega Mazibu. Was the whip with Yes,
Chair, I second
Honorable.
the move.
Thank you, Honorable Mwali. That then concludes the minutes that were meant to. So, members, just by way of announcements, just so that members are aware, on Friday we were meant to meet the Portfolio Committee on Communications and Digital Transformation. That is now cancelled. It will be replaced because the last thing we need is spare time, is a meeting between us and the PBO and the FFC, which is scheduled to resume at 8 o'clock on the virtual platform on Friday. Honorable members, I need to appraise you to some of the more contingency work that we're having to do. As I did alert members last week that to adopt the Division of Revenue Bill, to accommodate public hearings, and also to ensure Parliament can vote on these issues, having adopted the fiscal framework, we've needed to adjust the program. So even the program that you've got in front of you is bound to change. I have a meeting with the House Chairperson to discuss this issue. You will recall it was meant to be voted on the day before Good Friday or for Catholics, Holy Thursday. That has now been postponed to later on. I suspect it's the 21st of April. So I'm just checking all the legalities with this issue. We have a meeting with that and with the House Chairperson to discuss some of these programming issues. Part of the issue is that I am insistent, honorable members, public hearing is public hearing. It is not just Zoom hearing. It is the public, the people of South Africa. So we are also changing the dates for our public hearings in KZN, which we will confirm about that in a moment. Those are now tentatively scheduled for the 17th of March, which is 1 week before. So, honorable members, I'm just sensitizing you to the complexity of managing the legal aspect, which ensures that the Finance Committee does its job, managing the parliamentary aspect, making sure that we vote on votes and schedules on time, but also our own committee program, making sure we accommodate all the respective stakeholders coupled with the departments we'd like to see. So, honorable members, the changing of the program is not any other thing other than working with multiple variables at this time. So with those announcements, I think I've covered them. Just so you know, we will then reconvene on Friday morning at 8 a.m. on a virtual platform. That's an earlier start, I know, but it's better that way. Honorable Wakelin, I recognize you.
Chair, thank you. Without elaborating too much on the program, I again was over the weekend quite, and it's not the Secretariat's mistake. And I understand that what happens on a Z list is not necessarily what's in the program, and what's on the program doesn't appear on a Z list. I would say my true gospel, which is Matthew, Mark, and Luke, will be with the programming committee schedule, not the Z list. If you hear what I'm getting at. So if whatever stands in a committee program, that's the one I will follow. I would please request that going forward, that even if it's like twice a week or 3 times a week, let's just get updated as the information changes, that updates are sent through, as opposed to us relying on the Z list, which not always, there are serious delays in there, and then vice versa. But to me, the true gospel should be our own programming, that we can get it on a WhatsApp group and we can just track and because we've got travel arrangements to be made, and as you're aware, lately the traveling wasn't the greatest, and getting the agency also to respond adequately, that's another fight. It becomes also quite a frustration. Thank you, Chair.
No, that is well noted, and I take your point entirely. We keep trying to update it. in that regard. Mashile, is there, I saw your hand was up. Did you have a point to make or?
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Chair. In fact, in addition to what Honorable Wakelin has said, in fact, we had wanted to do things differently. We, as a Secretariat, we had planned to send the notice of activities for the entire term. But for this time, I think we apologize profusely. There was a delay in terms of sending the list of notice of activities because of the pending approval from the House Chairperson's office. But that is noted. We need to do that because members have to plan in time. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Honorable members, we will keep updating you. As you know, as I explained, I don't have to repeat the point. This is multiple variables on the go. But I also want for our report to be considered well in advance. So post that transport meeting, I want us to really think hard about what are some of the critical inputs that we need to make, consider the public hearing so that our report isn't in any way a rubber stamping exercise, but really grapples with some of the budget choices that we need to make. With those remarks, honorable members, let me thank you. Thank you. It is now just before 12 o'clock. We have stuck to time, starting and finishing. I will see you all on Friday, if not in the House this afternoon. Thank you. Meeting adjourned. Good afternoon.
Recording stopped.
Thank you, Chair.
Chair.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.